In the last chapter, you learned about the consumer decision process and the importance of understanding the experience from the consumer's point of view for effective marketing. Getting the consumer's perspective and understanding what motivates consumers at a deeper level requires research, and successful marketers are researchers. They're constantly looking for consumer insights that will give them the edge in the market. Formally defined, marketing research consists of a set of techniques and principles for systematically collecting, recording, analyzing, and interpreting data that can aid decision makers involved in marketing goods, services, or ideas. And the important part of this definition, the most important part, is the systematic part. Well, that's a very formal definition, while true and a little bit boring. The fun part is that companies use marketing research in a wide variety of situations. Insights into customer motivations, purchase behavior, and satisfaction being among the best and the most interesting. They assess also market potential and market share. They also measure the effectiveness of pricing, product, distribution, and promotion activities. Let's take a look at a video that describes just this situation in more detail.
Market research is a process used by businesses to gain a deeper understanding of who their target audience is, what their wants and needs are, and what influences their purchase decisions and behaviour. It is used in a wide range of scenarios, right from collecting the initial thoughts of the target market about potential products, through to analysing the competition and the market in general. The amount of time invested or budget allocated to market research activities varies between businesses. For example, some businesses may allocate zero budget, while others may invest millions of pounds each year. Rather than just acting out of instinct, entrepreneurs and managers will undertake market research to identify customer needs, identify gaps in the market, reduce risk, and ultimately make better decisions. Let's have a look at these core purposes of market research in more detail, with some examples of how famous businesses such as Apple, Lego, and Gymshark have used market research effectively to increase sales and grow into new markets. Identifying the needs of customers is potentially the core purpose of market research. When conducting market research with their target market, a business is likely to focus on factors such as price, quality, choice, and convenience, with the aim of collecting data and feedback which will support the business to provide their customers with the products they want or need at a price that they are willing to pay. If a business did not conduct market research, it could potentially result in them investing hundreds, thousands, or even millions of pounds into product development which the market does not want or need. LG and Sony are prime examples of businesses who failed to truly identify the wants and needs of customers through market research. After the highly successful 2009 release of Avatar 3D in cinemas, both LG and Sony launched their own 3D television range to capitalise on the trend. However, they didn't conduct sufficient market research before making this investment, and although the 3D film was a big hit in the cinemas, it turned out that customers did not have the want or the need to view their TV content in 3D in their homes. This resulted in both businesses eventually discontinuing the manufacture of their 3D TV range. In comparison, Apple are a prime example of a business who conduct extensive market research every single year through their Customer Pulse program. In fact, Apple spent a record $18.75 billion on research and development alone in 2020. This helps Apple to clearly identify the wants and needs of customers effectively, and even resulted in them diversifying their iPhone product range in 2013 with the release of the iPhone 5C. This was for customers who wanted an Apple iPhone, but did not particularly need the highest spec or want to pay a premium price. Market research is also very useful to help a business to identify any gaps in the market. A gap in the market is essentially where there is a potential demand for a product or service which is not currently being met. Whilst it can be risky for businesses to exploit these gaps, it can also be very lucrative if a business can firmly place themselves as the market leader in this gap. A very famous example of a business which failed to conduct sufficient market research and take advantage of a gap in the market is Blockbuster. They were once offered the chance to buy Netflix for $50 million, which would have allowed them to adapt the business model over time to the online streaming service we all know and use today. This resulted in Blockbuster eventually failing as a business and Netflix taking advantage of this gap in the market, with a market value which is now higher than Disney at a reported $194 billion, who by the way have now launched their own online streaming service to rival Netflix named Disney+. Another example of a business conducting market research to successfully identify a gap in the market is Gymshark. Co-founder Ben Francis suggested in a recent interview that he remembers looking around and not being able to find any clothing he wanted to wear for the gym, and he believed there was a clear gap in the market. So, with the help of his brother and a group of friends, Ben bought a sewing machine and a screen printer and started to make gym vests and t-shirts in his parents' garage. Gymshark was literally born in 2012 through a gap in the market. They started to make bodybuilder vests that fitted slimmer teenagers because most on the market were designed for older men who had already built up their muscle bulk. 8 years later, Gymshark is now a global business valued at over $1.3 billion in 2020. No matter how much market research a business conducts, it cannot eliminate risk entirely. However, it can reduce the risk by getting market insights and feedback from customers. Within business, risk comes in many shapes and sizes. There are monetary risks associated with investing money into products which may not be needed by the market. Alternatively, businesses face the risk of losing customers or facing public backlash through negative press coverage or even pressure groups if they fail to truly understand the market they operate within. A classic example of a business acting without conducting sufficient market research first is the well-known toothpaste brand Colgate. During the 1980s, Colgate decided to extend their product range from oral hygiene into frozen foods. However, they failed to reduce the risk of this brand extension strategy and ultimately paid heavily, as customers strongly associated Colgate with oral hygiene, which unfortunately did not make their frozen food products appetizing. Had Colgate have conducted market research initially, they would have found this information and either launched a frozen food range under a different brand name, or scrapped the venture entirely. Either way, they would have reduced the risk, saved a lot of time and money. The final core purpose of market research is to help businesses to make better decisions, whether this decision be around launching a new product or service, making a change to an existing product, or even investing into a new store location. A great example of a business utilising market research to make better decisions is Lego. For many years, Lego was seen as a boys' toy, and it was reported that only 9% of primary users were girls. Therefore, Lego conducted extensive market research to see if there was a demand in the market for Lego aimed at girls. In fact, they conducted a 4-year study which involved 3,500 girls and their mums. The market research included analysing girls' playing habits and lots of extensive questioning. This resulted in Lego launching a new product range in 2012 named Friends, which was aimed at girls. This product range was based on the foundations of Lego's core products, but included changes to the colour of the Lego bricks to more vibrant colours, a change to the packaging, and they also adapted the figures to a bigger size to accommodate accessories such as hairbrushes and purses. All of these decisions were based on the findings of the market research, and the company said it sold twice as many Lego Friends sets as it expected to when the product range first launched. However, Lego also faced criticism from some consumer groups who said it reinforced gender stereotypes. Having said this, profits rose by 35%, so you could argue that there was clearly a demand in the market for this type of product, which was supported by their market research. So that's it, the core purposes of market research explained.
So as you can see, successful marketers are researchers, and they're constantly looking for consumer insights that will give them an edge in the market. Aside from the applications you saw discussed in the video, as I mentioned before, it's an opportunity to develop insights into customer perceptions, attitudes, motivations, purchase behavior, and satisfaction. Marketers also often need very formal studies that provide timely and relevant data for specific marketing situations and decisions as they arise. Now, some large companies, like the ones I worked with, have their own research departments, and that have a marketing manager that works on marketing research projects directly with the brand people. And what happens in situations like this is we don't actually implement the research in these situations. We just direct the research. We then work with outside agencies who implement the research on our behalf. Now, what happens is companies that don't have big marketing research departments like the ones I just talked about often just turn to the outside suppliers and sort of turn over the entire marketing research function to them in its entirety and let them do it. The outside supplier essentially takes on then the marketing research department function for the company that doesn't have a marketing research department. These outside research specialists then would consult with management on specific marketing research problems and conduct the marketing research study for them. No matter what the process, no matter how that arrangement is made, the marketing research process always has 5 basic steps as illustrated in this exhibit. And these steps are to define the research problem and objectives, then design the research plan, collect the data, analyze the data and develop insights, and present the action plan to management. And we're going to take a look at these now in turn. The research process always begins with the definition of a problem or opportunity that requires investigation. These problems or opportunities can be short-term and specific, or longer-term and more general. A common mistake companies make is focusing on symptoms instead of problems in this stage. For example, declining sales or customers, switching to competitors, or both are both symptoms, not problems. To get to the problem, you need to ask yourself, why are sales declining? Or why are customers switching? Focusing on symptoms rather than the underlying problems can bias the research. So think about this. For example, if the marketing director thinks sales are declining because the product's not good enough, the research is obviously going to focus on product issues. But if the sales manager comes along and thinks the problem is really caused by prices being too high, then the research project is going to focus on price issues. Now, if you're focused on price issues, you might overlook product or promotion issues, and they might be the real problem. So it's critical to involve all who are related to the problem or the opportunity from the very beginning to ensure the focus is going to be identified appropriately. Clearly defining that problem and the research objective helps to keep the scope of the project in check, and this leads to step 2 of the project. The second step in the research process is to develop the research plan. Key questions are, what's the primary objective of the research? What type of research will be conducted? What information will be needed and how will it be collected? How will the data be analyzed? What are the desired outcomes of the research? So the research plan details sources of existing data, and it spells out the specific research approaches, the contact methods, the sampling plans, and the instruments that researchers will use to gather new data. And essentially, the more carefully the research program is planned in advance, the more likely the research is to be beneficial to the company. Let's consider an example. Suppose Swiss Chalet wants to know how consumers would react to the addition of vegan chicken tenders to its appetizer menu. According to a 2017 report, almost 10% of Canadians identify as vegan or vegetarian. Yet vegan offerings at fast food or fast casual chains are usually limited to sides such as fries or salads with no cheese. So adding vegan options could attract new sales and allow Swiss Chalet to become a market leader for vegan offerings. The proposed research might call for the following specific information: the demographic, economic, and lifestyle characteristics of current Swiss Chalet customers who don't eat meat. Or would Swiss Chalet need to target a new segment of customers? Then they would look at the characteristics and usage patterns of the broader population of fast food and fast casual diners, and what do they need and expect from such restaurants? Where, when, and how do they use them? And what existing quality, price, and service levels do they value? The new Swiss Chalet offering would definitely require strong, relevant, and distinctive positioning in the crowded fast food market. And what would be the impact on the Swiss Chalet consumer experience? Would vegan chicken offerings be consistent in quality with its famous rotisserie chicken? Perhaps Swiss Chalet might have to explore employee reactions to vegan chicken. Would restaurant employees buy into such a non-traditional product? Would they be able to prepare and present it properly? So once the research has been mapped out, the plan should be presented in the form of a written proposal. And this is especially important when the project's of critical importance, is large and complex, or being conducted by an outside firm. And the proposal should cover the management problem being addressed, the research objectives, the information to be obtained, and how the results will help management's decision making. The proposal should also include estimated research costs. And it also specifies the source of existing data, details the specifics of how the research is going to gather the new data, what the research approach is going to be, the contact methods, the sampling plan, how the data is going to be analyzed. The more carefully planned in advance, the more likely that research is to be beneficial to the company. The third step in the research process is to collect data. And data collection begins only after the research design process is complete. The type of data needed and how it's collected will largely depend on the goal and the type of research being conducted. And based on the design of the project, data can come from one of two sources depending on whether there's data already available that can be used to answer the research question or whether new data will need to be collected. Both types of data are used depending on timing of research needs and budgets. Companies have to make a trade-off at that step, since the complexity amount of information collected will directly influence the cost of collecting the information and in many cases how long it takes to collect it. We're going to talk about what these different types of data are in a minute, but for now let's focus on the research process, and the next step is step 4. And of course I've identified what types of data they are on this slide, but we'll dig into them a little bit more. Just didn't want to confuse things a little bit too much. I'd like to get through the steps of the research process first. Data analysis, or step 4, follows directly from the data collection step, and the two are closely tied together. This step should be both thorough and methodical. This is really where the systematic part comes in. To generate meaningful information, researchers analyze and make use of the collected data. Different data requires different analysis, and specialized trained researchers should be used to analyze data to get the full benefit of the research. Knowing what techniques are appropriate in different circumstances and how to use them is a specialized skill, and it's one of the most important opportunities for those interested in marketing research on the supplier side as a career. And I emphasize that because I've been a marketing researcher all my life, but I'm not a statistician by any means. And you don't have to be a statistician to be in marketing research on the client side. You have to understand how to apply statistics, and you have to basically understand what statistics can give you what information, but you don't have to be a statistical wizard to be able to be in marketing research because you hire statistical wizards to do that work for you. So while knowledge of statistics, analytics, and other research tools is a definite plus for marketing research managers on the client side, much of this work is done by paid professionals outside the company. Data on its own, though, has limited value to marketers, but by putting it into a form that's useful to marketing decision makers, that data, when interpreted, becomes information. Information is powerful. So data is converted to information in order to describe, explain, predict, and/or evaluate a particular situation and use it to develop insights. And it's critical that data be analyzed and interpreted in an objective manner. And that's critical, really critical in marketing research. No bias. Data analysis might be as simple as calculating the average purchase of different customer segments, or as complex as forecasting sales by market segment by using elaborate statistical techniques. Now, what insights do you think you could develop by analyzing this data? For the McDonald's example in this exhibit, McDonald's and Wendy's score almost the same on the cleanliness of their restaurants, but McDonald's has lower prices, but the food at Wendy's tastes better. So McDonald's may want to improve the taste of its food without raising its prices too much to compete more effectively with Wendy's, right? Now, when you take a look at this data, this looks pretty darn simple, but there's a lot of different questions that were asked on a questionnaire to arrive at this simplistic data, to get it into this chart form. So, it's all in the eyes of the beholder, as they say. And to get it into this form took numerous questions, took a skill of a data analyst to be able to put it into information that's usable to the market, to the client, to the marketer. In the final phase of the research process, the analyst prepares the results and presents them to the decision makers, who then undertake appropriate marketing actions and strategies. And a typical marketing research report would start with a 2-page executive summary. This would highlight the objectives of the study, methodology, and key insights, and then the body of the report would go through the objectives of the study, the issues examined, the methodology, the analysis and results, also insights and managerial implications. And then the report would end with conclusions and any limitations or caveats. And many consultants today also provide an executive summary, a PowerPoint presentation of the report, the questionnaire, and then the tabulated study results as well. So now let's move on to more about how we classify each and what the different types mean and how and when we use them. And I'm talking data now. Research types now. And this chart doesn't appear in your text. I put this together to try to give you an overall view of what research looks like, because there are so many different terms that are used, how we classify things, and it can get a little bit mind-boggling in a way. So I wanted to put it there to just sort it all out. So to begin, there are two broad classifications of marketing research: primary and secondary research. And the first question marketers must ask as they determine their research design is whether the information they require to make a decision already exists. So for example, a coffee producer that needs to know the differences in coffee consumption among different demographic and geographic segments of the market, well, they may find that the information they need is available from one or more studies that have already been conducted. That information may have been collected for some purpose other than the problem at hand. And if it has, that's called secondary data. In marketing research, we further break down secondary data as it is classified as either internal to the organization or external. And internal data is defined as data that originated in the organization. It simply means it was created, recorded, or generated by the organization. And even though the logical starting point in searching for secondary data is the company's own internal information, can't believe how many organizations fail to realize the wealth of information that they have in their own records, such as their own rich store of customer information and purchase history. Also, internal data is the most readily available. It can be accessed at little or no cost at all. It has the advantage of being proprietary to the company, which means nobody else has access to that information. But there is one important caveat. Researchers should always bear in mind that most of that information comes from past business activities. So that's not to say that internal data isn't usable for future business decisions. It simply means that internal data sources can be highly effective in planning, for example, new product introductions or new distribution outlets. That would be some examples of really good uses of that internal data. Far more typically, though, researchers need to look elsewhere for secondary data. That's where external sources of secondary data come in. So external data are those found outside the organization. Simply means that they're generated or originate by an entity other than the researcher's organization. And there are many sources of external secondary data that are free or inexpensive that can be quickly accessed. Companies can obtain reports published by both the popular and the business press, maybe studies that private research organizations or government agencies conduct and publish. Maybe there's research can be studied, research can be published on the state of the industry from trade organizations. Some common sources for secondary data include competitor company reports, customer research, government sources, trade publications, and other third-party information sources. One type of secondary data is a database by Environics Analytics called PRISM5. It provides marketers with a deep understanding of 68 different lifestyle types derived from an analysis of Canadian census data. It's based on the premise that birds of a feather flock together. In other words, people with similar backgrounds and interests tend to live and spend time among each other. You can try this yourself by Googling Environics, ENVIRONICS, Analytics, PRISM5. Put in your postal code and see what it spits out in terms of where you live and how it profiles you. So from this information, marketers can gain a snapshot of, for example, a LaSalle postal code located in a fairly narrow radius, geographic radius. And it's defining this area, for example, that I'm showing you here, as an area of first-class families or large high-income suburban families. And you see it gives a snapshot of average household income, net worth, education, occupation, family life cycle, home type, and how much of the population this segment represents. It then further describes how people in this cluster think, specifically their attitudes towards things. Statements such as, how my personal information is stored by companies and the government isn't very important. I always keep informed about the latest technological developments, and I'm willing to pay more for brand name products. These types of statements provide insight for marketers to leverage when developing communications targeted to this group, for example. And finally, how information on how they live provides even more insight to marketers, as it shows the various types of activities that define our lives and how this segment is positioned within each. So for example, for restaurants, these first-class families tend to dine at fast casual restaurants. When shopping, Home Depot best defines the retailer of interest to them. They tend to watch CBC, which would be a key finding, be it for the consumption of news media or to identify the best media buying opportunities for advertising to this group, if they also watch CBC for entertainment purposes, for example. Well, you may not remember a time before grocery stores used scanners, but the installation of scanners created a huge new data source for marketers. And what do you think researchers can take from scanner data? Well, which consumers purchase what products together and how often is one major thing. They can also immediately track the impact of any price or promotional adjustments. So using this data helps consumer packaged firms like Pepsi and Kraft assess what's happening in the market. So also, for example, a firm can determine what would happen to sales if it reduced its price by 10% in a given month. Did the sales increase, decrease, or stay the same? Another great use of scanner data could be the way I used it as a brand manager with respect to coupon redemption. So, for example, Nielsen, many of you know Nielsen because they do the TV, movie, and ratings, for example, reporting. But they also come into consumer packaged goods company and they tell you how promotions, how coupons are having an impact on your sales. So let's say Nielsen comes into Christie to tell me how my sales are doing in a month. And they say that, okay, you had a coupon on Premium Plus for $1, and you had a 7% coupon redemption on your 450 gram product in 2022. I say, that's great. Okay, 7% in 2022. I asked them what the percentage was in 2021. Just remind me. And they say, well, it was 7%. And I say, okay, well, we could leave it at that and call it a day because, the fact of the matter, it's 7% across the board. That sounds good. It's remaining constant. But because Nielsen attaches scanner data that includes demographic, purchase data, and a whole lot more to that data, very rich consumer information, I can ask for a further breakdown to see if is 7%, 7%, 7%. I may find that the 7% coupon redemption for Premium Plus in 2021 was actually made up largely of light users of Premium Plus. But in 2022, maybe that 7% was made up of heavy users. And as a marketer, what does that reveal to me and what might I do with that information? Well, it reveals that the characteristics of buyers who were redeeming coupons were potentially very different year over year. And it may be worth investigating this. Was it a blip or something we need to understand more? Remember our SWOT? What do I do with that information? In the long term, it may impact my marketing strategies. In the short term, I may adjust my marketing tactics, recognizing in 2021, my coupon program was potentially serving to incentivize light users to try the brand, while in 2022, it just may have meant that I was simply rewarding my already loyal, heavy users of the brand, offering a price reduction. So do you see how very different these two coupon programs potentially worked? So 7% wasn't as simple as looking at it when it was just reported to me in that boardroom at that time. If secondary research doesn't resolve the problem, the research process moves to another stage, and that's the collection of primary data. Primary research refers to the process of collecting and recording new data, which is called primary data. And that's in order to resolve the specific problem at hand. And usually that's at a high cost to the sponsoring organization. Primary research is custom designed and it focuses on resolving a particular question or obtaining specified information. A procedure is developed and a research instrument is designed to perform the specific task. Primary data includes gathering demographic and psychological information about your own and/or competitors' consumers, their attitudes and opinions about products and competing products, as well as awareness or knowledge about a product and beliefs about the people who use those products. There are many advantages to primary data. Chief among them are the relevance of it. It's collected with specific information in mind to address the research problem. It's very timely, as it's collected when the research process is defined, and it's customized in that it's collected in the most efficient and effective manner relative to the research goals at hand. But the disadvantages of primary data are also very real. It's extremely time-consuming and it's extremely expensive. Data collection through primary research requires that the researcher make several important decisions: which methods to use, what types of sampling plans are best in light of the research objective, what types of research instruments to use. For example, is it going to be a questionnaire? Is it going to be observation research? How the research instrument should be designed, and how best to contact potential respondents. Will it be through telephone, online research, in person, by mail, for example? Improper execution of any of these important aspects of primary data collection could seriously reduce the reliability and validity of the research study. And there are generally two categories of research: qualitative, which is exploratory in nature, and quantitative, which provides the information needed to confirm these insights that a firm might have. Marketers use exploratory research, also known as qualitative, to come up with ideas for new strategies and opportunities, or perhaps just to get a better handle on a problem they're currently experiencing with a product. Because the studies are usually small scale and less costly than other techniques, marketers may do this to test their hunches about what's going on without too much risk or expense. Again, we refer to exploratory research as qualitative research, which means the results of the research project tend to be non-numeric and instead might be detailed verbal or visual information about consumers' attitudes, feelings, and buying behavior. In contrast, quantitative research produces numeric results that can be analyzed using a variety of statistical programs. And we're going to dig into these things a little bit more. So let's start by looking at qualitative research. It also happens to be my favorite kind of research because this is where we can get in front of consumers and dig deep into their motives and really try to understand what makes them tick. It's also where so many of the aha moments and insights have come from, as well as the many inspirations over the years. Again, as I mentioned, this is a data collection method that provides non-numerical data. So think of it as quality, not quantity. And the key strength is the ability to capture open-ended responses and make sense of them. Again, this is research with an exploratory goal. It's generally used to gain in-depth understanding of a marketing problem or opportunity. I'll give you an example. There were many yoga companies back in the day. Adidas was making yoga clothing, as was Puma, Nike, and women were wearing their yoga clothes, well, actually to do yoga. It was very functional. It was made to wick away moisture and be flexible while you moved. Lululemon looked at this and saw increasingly that women were wearing their yoga clothing outside of the yoga studio because it was comfortable for them, but also because it was part of their identity. And it was telling them, I value my health and this is who I am. So Lululemon realized that they weren't in the activewear business, they were in the fashion business. And this was a fashion statement now. And what did Lululemon do? What no one else was doing. They started creating beautiful prints, really flattering cuts. It was actually quite genius. They charged a huge premium for it, and they created a new category for it called athleisure wear. Categories in fashion don't crop up every day. So this is the big one of our generation. And athleisure wear is its own distinct segment of fashion now. They ushered it in, and it's because of this exploratory research they did. And now you have a bunch of other brands to compete for the same thing, including Athleta, for example, and Sweaty Betty, and there's all kinds of others, as you well know. Let's look at another example. Why has craft whiskey become so popular in recent years relative to whiskey from the larger distillers? Well, using qualitative research, a researcher could ask consumers why they like certain whiskey, what they look for when they're trying new whiskeys, why they're willing to spend more on craft whiskey than other whiskey. In qualitative research, the researcher has a specific question or a set of questions to be answered, but they often don't have a good idea about what those answers might be, or in some cases, even what format they might take. So for example, if Wolf had Distillers, a local distillery, asked consumers if they like craft whiskey and why, the company might get a variety of different answers. A consumer might reply, "Yeah, I like it, but it's usually more expensive, so I don't drink it all the time." Or they might say, "No, most of it tastes too strange," or "I don't like how the whiskeys are all flavored these days." There are a number of other responses, as some consumers might have really lengthy and complex responses, while other consumers might have shorter, simpler responses. Wolfhead might also want to conduct exploratory research to discover customer preferences for different whiskey flavors and which whiskey customers like to pair with specific food dishes. Or if a consumer mentions during an interview that they think craft whiskey is more authentic, the marketer can explore what the customer means by authentic and what it is about craft whiskey that influences this perception. But the researcher has to take that time to interview consumers and has to be trained to interpret what the consumer says to pick out the useful information. If Wolfhead discovers that some people think of craft whiskey as more authentic, it might also want to determine if this is a common notion that whiskey drinkers have, or if this opinion is held by only a small group of customers. The company might also want to determine who these customers are and how they're different from other customers. And they can't get this information from qualitative research. Both those questions have something called descriptive goals that would be answered using quantitative research. So going one step further, Wolfhead might also want to know if using certain wording in its ads would make consumers feel the company was more authentic. And this would be a question that would also have to be answered using descriptive research. So we're going to look at something called descriptive research in a little bit. Data collection methods for qualitative research primarily include focus groups and personal interviews, but they can also include observation research and social media. Now, there's also in this exhibit something called projective techniques. That isn't a type of qualitative research method. It's a tool that's generally used in focus groups or depth interviews, but mostly it's used in focus groups. It's possible to get a lot of information about people by simply watching what they do in various situations. Observational data are the behavioral patterns among the population of interest. It's essentially a research method that involves watching what customers do and recording patterns of interest. In this form of research, people knowingly or unknowingly participate in the study. For example, the purchase behavior of people in a supermarket can be observed in person or by electronic means. And one of the most common uses of this type of research is in retailing. Retailers watch how people move through a store, noting what aisles they go up and down, and where they spend their time. It can generate fresh customer and market insights that people are willing, unwilling, or unable to provide. It kind of provides a window into customers' unconscious actions, unexpressed needs, and feelings. Marketers want to understand your behavior, so they're developing ever more useful observation methods. I'll give you some examples here. There was a store that used cameras to capture dog food and dog treat sales. So they noticed that adults focused on buying dog food stocked on lower shelves, whereas the seniors and children that came into the store were more focused on buying dog treats that happened to be stocked on higher shelves. Well, what was the conclusion? That they moved the dog treats down within easier reach of the seniors and children. And when they did that, not surprisingly, the sales increased. And because adults were going to come in and buy that dog food anyways, and now the children and seniors could actually reach the treats, which increased the sales of them. So, question, just think to yourself, you're in the drive-thru and you want ketchup with your fries. So how do you deal with opening the ketchup package? Do you rip off the corner of the package with your teeth? What is your behavior? So Heinz set out to find this out after numerous consumer complaints were flooding in from people who were constantly making messes doing such a thing. And they discovered when they asked people how they opened the ketchup package that typically people either ripped off the corner of the packet with their teeth, that they forego fries at the drive-thru altogether, and there were even people who said that while driving they squirted ketchup directly into their mouth, then added the fries. It's an odd behavior, I think. Okay. So they decided they wanted to develop a more user-friendly package for people who ate in the car while driving. It seems a little odd to enable this behavior. To develop the new packet, Heinz sat behind one-way mirrors watching consumers in 20 fake minivan interiors putting ketchup on fries, burgers, and chicken nuggets. And after observing these and other what they called compensating behaviors, they developed a better ketchup package called the dip and squeeze, which can be squeezed out through one end or the lid can be peeled back for dipping. It's a red bottle-shaped pack, as you can see here, and it holds 3 times the ketchup. As you guessed, so that's the little observation story. And as you can guess, privacy concerns have escalated as the technology advances for observation research have become more sophisticated for observing customer behavior. Observation is good, though, for detecting behavior patterns, but it lacks the ability to determine underlying causes for the behavior. So that's a major drawback for it. Also, it can be extremely time-consuming and costly to use. Observation research can be short or it can last for days and weeks. It's particularly useful when consumers are unable to articulate their experiences, though. New methods of observation and research are cropping up every day. I love that at one point I was on the forefront of virtual reality in terms of setting up store fronts for creating fake shelves, and people would put on virtual reality glasses, and I was part of a team going to New York City where we developed this for liquor stores, and people would go in with their virtual reality glasses on, and we would have Canadian Club on the aisle with their new packaging, and people could test and we could see which package was going to resonate with them better just by their eye movement. That's something that's quite old now, but at the time it was revolutionary. It was really interesting to be involved in that. Some of the new methods now follow consumers within a physical location using electronic shopping carts with GPS, which tracks movement through stores to better understand traffic patterns. There's also facial recognition sensors on store shelves to identify gender and the age of shoppers, and then link those customer characteristics with purchase behavior. Now, ethnography is a completely different form of observation research, and it goes way, way back. And I believe it was started by either Procter & Gamble or Campbell's, and they would go in literally and sit down in a person's home and spend time with them, and they would do it over a longitudinal type of study. Then it kind of fell out of favor, but now it's resurfaced, and the resurgence has come back in time. Ethnography is the study of human behavior in a natural setting. And many companies now hire anthropologists who literally go on cultural digs, excavating the lives of real people. They'll go shopping with people, they'll follow them around and watch how they interact with others. And then back to the way it used to be done, some companies go a step further and visit homes in order to observe people's behavior in their personal environment. One company that is doing this quite frequently now is IKEA, and they're doing it all around the world. They search for new product ideas to meet typical household needs. In Canada, they visit 240 Canadian households a year, many of them households where space is a scarce commodity, because they know that people have nowhere to store things and their places are filled with clutter. So IKEA wants to know what customers need in order to live more simply and easily. The advantages of ethnography include capturing information in a natural setting, as customers are, well, being customers. It also offers a chance to interact with customers as they're using products to actually get at their behavior. And this is remember the downside of observational research? This is the upside of being able to now investigate, allowing the research to investigate the cause for a specific behavior. Now, drawbacks are similar to other qualitative methods, and they include the fact that costs can be very, very high with this methodology. The data collection processing time is extremely time-consuming. The data collection analysis requires very specialized research skills. Remember those anthropologists? And observational and ethnography research often yields the kinds of details that just don't emerge from traditional research questionnaires or focus groups. So whereas traditional quantitative research approaches seek to test known hypotheses and obtain answers to well-defined product or strategy questions, observational research can generate fresh customer and market insights that people are unwilling or unable to provide. And it provides a window into customers' unconscious actions and unexpressed needs and feelings. But some things simply can't be observed, like attitudes, motives, or private behavior. So long-term or infrequent behavior is also difficult to observe. And observations can be very difficult to interpret. And because of these limitations, researchers often do use observation along with other data collection methods. Traditional marketing research provides logical consumer responses to structured and intrusive questions. Online listening, however, provides the passion and spontaneity of unsolicited, real-time consumer opinions. It can provide valuable information that might aid a company's marketing research and strategy endeavors, and it's dramatically changed how companies acquire primary data. There's loads of niche cosmetic brands, but there's no other company that better exemplifies a grassroots approach to product development than Glossier and how it uses marketing research. Rather than create a product followed by a marketing campaign, Glossier's founder and CEO, Emily Weiss, does the opposite. First, she listens to what women want by asking the right questions through social media, which basically functions as a focus group for women, and then our company creates products for the demand she knows is there. She's well aware of the power of social media, particularly Instagram. She ensured that when designing products that the packaging be visual and customizable so that they would pop on visual social media sites. Glossier isn't passive about how it gathers feedback from its users on social media. The company takes its cues from what women are talking about and the stories they're sharing, or it will instigate a conversation. They ask its social media follows what they most want from a heavy-duty moisturizer, for example. And more than 1,000 responses later, the company then creates a product it launches, for example, in less than a year, based entirely on the feedback it gathers from its followers. Glossier is basically conducting a non-stop focus group with women, and its success proves that listening pays off. Let's take a look at a video about from the founder of Glossier.
Beauty has become very democratized in 2017. That power of the individual to express herself today and express her opinions about product is incredibly empowering. Glossier was born out of Into the Gloss, which is a beauty blog that I founded out of my apartment in 2010. I really wanted to celebrate beauty as part of women's routines and their overall expression. Glossier is really the first socially driven beauty brand. It's become what it has become so quickly because of our customers really supporting the brand and generating a ton of content around Glossier. For us, we really see every single one of our customers as her own expert. And that's been made possible through technology, through the ability of information to be shared friend to friend, peer to peer, largely digitally. With Glossier, we always think if there were never a beauty brand before, how would you design one today? There's always been a need and a hypersexualized kind of glam taste that some people have, and I think that's totally cool and should be celebrated. I think there's also a different customer out there, different kind of woman who doesn't necessarily subscribe to that beauty ideal and doesn't necessarily want a full face of makeup, every morning. I think we're enabling women to, do less, should they choose, through using our products. We hope that we create these modern day essentials that really unite many women from many different, backgrounds, ethnicities. There's this frivolous kind of stereotype put on women who care a lot about the way they look or, care at all about the way they look. You're meant to kind of not spend a lot of time on how you look, but also look great. And there's all these paradoxes when it comes to beauty. And so I've really enjoyed watching, legions of women really take ownership of their approach to beauty as something that they can be really proud of.
Another qualitative method is an in-depth interview, in which trained researchers ask questions and listen to and record the answers from the respondent, and then pose additional questions to clarify or expand on a particular issue. An in-depth interview provides insights that help managers better understand the nature of their industry, as well as important trends and consumer preferences, and they can be invaluable for developing marketing strategies. In-depth interviews are, however, relatively expensive and time-consuming. Now, the thing about in-depth interviews is essentially it's a one-on-one situation. It's a relatively long interview. They're usually designed to meet with a professional, usually, who isn't suited to be in a focus group setting, maybe a doctor or a CEO type of professional, or it is required that you don't want interference from a group situation, like a group think type of thing, or it's just something that requires so much probing that you're not going to get that kind of information in a group setting. But again, they're long, therefore they're expensive, and many have to be conducted. In focus group interviews, a small group of people, usually 8 to 12, come together for an intensive discussion about a particular topic. And in particular, focus groups gather qualitative data about initial reactions to new or existing products or services, opinions about different competitive offerings, or reactions to marketing stimuli, like a new ad or campaign, or maybe a point of purchase display material. I'm going to show you a video now that really does a really great job of explaining the origins of focus groups and how they still are a very effective use today. In fact, that's their very primary kind of research that are used today. Let's take a look.
Why do we buy certain products or choose certain brands? This is the sort of question advertisers have always asked, and there are no easy answers. However, there is a handy tool that helps companies explore this and similar questions, and it's called the focus group. Until the 1940s, market research was often quantitative, using things like sales figures and customer polls to track consumption. But this changed during World War II. Sociologists Robert Merton and Paul Lazarsfeld set out to learn how unprecedented exposure to wartime propaganda was affecting the public. Instead of polling large numbers of people with straightforward questions and quantifiable answers, the researchers conducted in-person interviews, sometimes with small groups, engaging them in more open discussions. Later, this method was picked up by the advertising industry with the help of consultants like Austrian-born psychologist Ernest Dichter, who first coined the term focus group. This new technique was a type of qualitative research focused on the nature of people's preferences and thoughts. It couldn't tell marketers what percentage of people buy a certain product or brand, but it could tell them more about the people who do, their reasoning for doing so, and even the unconscious motivations behind those reasons. Rather than providing definite conclusions for business and sales, focus groups would be used for exploratory research, generating new ideas for products and marketing based on deeper understanding of consumer habits. For example, early focus groups found that contrary to popular opinion at the time, wives often had more influence than their husbands when choosing which car to buy. So Chrysler shifted gears by marketing cars directly to women. And Dr. Dichter himself conducted focus groups for Mattel to learn what girls wanted in a doll. The result was the original Barbie doll. So how does a focus group work? First, companies recruit between 6 and 10 participants according to specific criteria that meet their research objectives. They could be mothers of children between 5 and 7, or teenagers planning to buy a new phone in the next 3 months. This is often done through professional recruiters who manage lists of people who've agreed to participate in focus groups for payment or other rewards. During a session, participants are asked to respond to various prompts from the group moderator, like sharing their opinions on a certain product or their emotional reactions to an advertisement. They may even be asked to do seemingly unrelated tasks, like imagining brands as animals in a zoo. The idea is that this can reveal useful information about the participants' feelings that traditional questions might not get to. Beyond these basics, many variations are possible. A focus group may have 2 or more moderators, perhaps taking opposite sides on a question. Or a researcher might be hidden in the focus group, unknown to other participants, to see how their answers can be influenced. And the whole process may also be observed by researchers through a one-way mirror. But although they can provide valuable insight, focus groups do have their limitations, and one of the main ones is that the simple act of observing something can change it. This principle is called observer interference. The answers participants give are likely to be affected by the presence of the researchers, social pressure from the rest of the group, or simply knowing that they're taking part in a focus group. And because researchers often use a small sample size in a specific setting, it's hard to generalize their results. The findings that researchers do reach from focus groups are often tested through experiments and data gathering. Those put numbers on questions like how many potential customers there are and what price they'd be willing to pay. This part of the process changes as technology evolves. But focus groups have remained largely the same for decades. Perhaps when it comes to the big important questions, there's no substitute for people genuinely interacting with each other.
So earlier I mentioned quantitative research. Anyone recall what that is? Well, it's research that produces numeric results that can be analyzed using a variety of statistical programs. And as opposed to qualitative research, where marketers can gain a more in-depth or quality understanding, quantitative research is used by marketers to count, classify, and measure things related to a marketing problem. And that allows them to understand how many customers do something or how often something happens. So it's often used to assess the relative importance of something the marketer is interested in. Let's circle back to our Wolfhead Distillery example. They may want to know if there are income differences between customers who like craft whiskey versus those who buy whiskey from the larger distillers, or how much influence price has on someone's decision to buy one whiskey versus another. And those questions can't be accurately assessed using qualitative research, but they can be answered by quantitative research. And that's because quantitative research is intended to verify insights and to aid decision makers in selecting specific courses of action. Marketers might conduct quantitative research, which is also sometimes referred to as descriptive research, by surveying customers to see how many, for example, are willing to pay $50 for a liter of their whiskey. Or maybe in qualitative research, they discuss craft whiskey with a group of customers who provided 4 or 5 different explanations as to why they buy craft whiskey, like special occasions, or it tastes better, or it seems more natural, or there's more variety. Those are some examples. And now the marketers realize they must survey more customers to see which of these potential explanations is the most common. And then descriptive research is used to quantify what was discovered in qualitative research. So you can see by the example I just gave you, it's common for marketers to use a combination of the 2 research types to address a research problem. The marketing manager might only have a rough idea of what's happening, and then they need to know more before deciding how to proceed. Then once they have a better idea, they turn to quantitative research to quantify what was discovered in the qualitative research. Quantitative research then provides an accurate snapshot of some aspect of the marketing environment. It describes the characteristics of the objects, the people, the groups, the organization, or the environment. Again, it addresses the who, what, when, the where, the why, and the how questions. It involves a considerable understanding of the nature of the problem. Now, in quantitative research, the sample should represent the entire population of interest if the results are to be relied upon by the marketer, and accuracy becomes critically important. If you want to use non-probability sampling, there are many convenience techniques that can be available to you, but it's not projectable. Therefore, you can't say with accuracy that your results are based on the population of interest. If you use online research for your sampling, that's considered convenience sampling, and that means you cannot say with certainty that your results are reflective of the population. It's an actual fact that purchases of both diapers and beer peak between 5 and 7 p.m. But can we say that purchasing one of these products caused shoppers to purchase the other as well? And if so, which caused which? Does taking care of a baby drive parents to drink? Well, actually, probably. Gotta be honest. Or is the answer simply that this happens to be when young parents stop at the store on their way home from work to pick up a bottle of wine and a box of Pampers or beer? The descriptive techniques we looked at do a good job of providing valuable information about what's happening in the marketplace. But by its nature, descriptive research can only describe a marketplace phenomena. It can't tell us why it occurs. Sometimes marketers need to know if something they've done has brought about some change in behavior. So for example, does one product next to another in a store mean that people will buy more of each? Well, we can't answer this question through simple observation or through descriptive research. So causal research attempts to identify cause and effect relationships between two or more things. Marketers use causal research when they want to know if a change in something, for example, placing cases of beer next to diaper display, is responsible for a change in something else, like a big increase in diaper sales. They call the factors that might cause such a change the independent variable and the outcomes the dependent variable. So descriptive research provides a sense of how important something might be, but again, it doesn't address why something might happen. Causal research attempts to identify cause and effect relationships between two or more things. The results can be conclusive and statistically calculated, but companies have to make a trade-off at this step. The complexity and amount of information that's collected directly influences the cost and time of collecting the information. Causal research often involves experimental designs, as mentioned. Experiments attempt to establish causality by ruling out alternative explanations and to maintain a high level of control. So researchers may bring consumers into a lab so they can control precisely what the consumer experiences. In our diaper example, a group of parents might be paid to come into a testing facility or enter a virtual store on a computer screen, and researchers would ask them to fill a grocery cart as they click through the virtual aisles. The experiment might vary the placement of the diapers next to the shelves of beer in one scenario and near paper goods in another. And the objective of the experiment would be to find out which placement gets more of the parents to put diapers into their carts. So causal research can take a very long time to implement, and it often involves intricate designs that can be very expensive. So Canadian Club, for example, when it changed its label, or Ritz when it does a label change, that's when they do the virtual reality and the store layout and everything, and they use a causal design. Yes, it's observation, but it can also be used for causal research as well. Now, to close the chapter, I'd like to show you a video about the introduction of a new product for Ritz. It does an excellent job of summarizing how research is used from concept to development to launch of a new product. And I think it ties together this entire chapter beautifully, and I think you'll really enjoy watching it.
What is the difference between a cracker and a chip? Kraft asked that very question when they decided to launch Ritz Toasted Chips, an extension of their Ritz cracker brand. The buttery Ritz cracker has been popular since its launch in 1934, and Kraft wanted to expand the brand by developing a new product that would bring Ritz into a new category. Kraft needed to do market research, the method of accumulating information from external and internal sources, in order to understand what would be the best product to create and introduce on the market.
Ritz had introduced a number of line extensions, new flavors and so forth over the previous few years, but hadn't really added a lot of additional volume to the line. They'd been purchased mostly by existing users. So the goal of this program was to introduce something under the Ritz name that would really add incremental volume to the Ritz business.
Through its extensive consumer insights and its work with AC Nielsen, Kraft gathered and interpreted information that helped them understand the snack food market. Statistics showed that the chip category was growing twice as fast as the cracker category. Kraft knew that achieving even a small share of the growing chip market would grow their business tremendously. Kraft understood that one way to grow the brand would be to create a Ritz cracker that had the characteristics of a chip. They also knew that to appeal to their current consumers, the new product would have to retain some Ritz qualities. Market research would help them find that balance. Once they decided that the new product would be a Ritz chip, Kraft began investigating what makes a chip a chip. This question would be central to every step of the process.
We found that there are a number of differences in people's perceptions of chips and crackers. Crackers tend to be eaten by older people than chips. They tend to be eaten more in the winter, whereas chips tend to be eaten in summer. Crackers tend to have a little older imagery, whereas chips are seen as younger and more fun, more exciting, more intensely flavorful. So there were a lot of differences.
Studies showed that chips and crackers differ in shape, texture, and flavor. This information helped Kraft set texture and taste parameters for the prototypes used during the product development segment of the project.
Chips are more irregular, they're thin, they're crispy, whereas crackers are denser, more cake-like. So we needed to incorporate those chip-like qualities in our new product in order to have it appeal to people as a chip. We did find, though, that the Ritz name carries a lot of implications of butteriness and buttery flavor, so we needed to keep those flavor notes in the chip product that we were developing.
Through focus group feedback, Kraft was able to learn how to best position the new product.
We had to understand how to talk about this product to consumers to get them to understand what it was from our advertising and positioning. And what we learned as we started to talk about descriptive language was that baked was a word that didn't really connote flavor for our consumers, whereas the term toasted really said flavorful to them, and it sounded more chip-like.
Finally satisfied with product and positioning, Kraft was faced with a critical decision about store placement.
When it came time to actually put the product on the shelf during our introduction, we had a major decision to make. We have a major presence in the cracker aisle, the cookie and cracker aisle, with the products that Kraft already has there, and Ritz has a big presence in that area. This was a chip item, and so a lot of discussion about whether we should try and put the product in the chip, the salty snack part of the store. Ultimately, we decided not to do that. It's very difficult to put a single new product in a section of the store where you don't already have a presence. So we made the decision to put it in the area that we're already in.
Traditionally, most crackers come in a box and chips come in bags. Kraft looked at many box and bag alternatives, but decided on a bag since many consumers associate bags with chips. Kraft developed a special bag that can stand up on a shelf, like a box. They also chose big, bold graphics that are more chip-like in feel. These packaging features help set the Ritz toasted chips apart from crackers on the shelves around them. Kraft launched Ritz toasted chips in 3 flavors to great success. Results were better than predicted, and since the launch, Kraft has added a 4th flavor of Ritz toasted chips and launched a Wheat Thins toasted chips product line.
Market research played a central role to the success of Ritz toasted chips. From the beginning, in terms of the idea, the concept behind it, understanding the differences between where we were from a cracker standpoint to where we needed to go, that informed the design of the product, the design of the package, that even informed where we put the product in the store. It was really central to the whole effort to introduce this new item on the Ritz line, and we've had a huge success with it in the marketplace.